Hey everyone, welcome to the Student Mind, where we dive into the conversations about topics that impact us as a student navigating the college experience. I'm your host Ansh, and today we are tackling a subject that's more relevant than ever: mindfulness. As a college student, we all have felt the pressure of balancing assignments, exams, friendship, and everything else. It can be overwhelming, right? That's why mindfulness comes in. Today, I am joined by some awesome classmates: Shivam, Daksh, Akash, and Gurpreet, who will be sharing their thoughts and experience on how mindfulness has helped them stay present and manage stress. Thank you for joining me, guys.
Glad to be here, Ansh.
To kick things off, let's talk about what mindfulness means to each of us. Shivam, I know you have been reading up on mindfulness lately. How will you explain it?
So mindfulness is basically about being aware of what's happening in the present moment. It's not just about meditation or quiet reflections. It's about staying connected to what's happening around you within you. Where you are walking to class, studying, or even just hanging out with friends, mindfulness helps you to stay in the moment without getting lost in distractions or worries. For me, it's been a way to cope with the constant stress and exams and assignments, especially when everything feels like it's piling up. I used to get overwhelmed easily, feeling like there was never enough time, but mindfulness has helped me break things down in smaller and manageable parts. It's like creating a mental buffer that lets me focus without panicking. I also find that when I practice mindfulness, I'm less likely to procrastinate because I'm more in tune with what I need to do, and that reduces the mental clutter.
That's a great way to put it. Daksh, what does mindfulness means to you?
Well, I think of it as mental clarity, like wiping a fogged up mirror. It's so easy to get caught up in overthinking about future deadlines, about things that happened last week, or even stuff that might not matter in the long run. Mindfulness is about hitting pause and focusing on the here and now. When I'm studying or playing sports, I've found that being mindful really helps me concentrate. It's like clearing out mental clutter. For example, when I'm playing basketball, there's so much happening in a split second. Your mind can race with thoughts about the next move or how you messed up a previous play. Mindfulness helps me shut out that noise and stay focused on the present moment, which is now, which ultimately improves my performance. It's really helped me stay cool under pressure, not just on the court but in life too. Off the court, I've also noticed that being mindful helps me not to dwell on things that went wrong, which can really lift a weight off my shoulders.
Akash, I know you have mentioned mindfulness in our conversations before. What's your take?
For me, mindfulness has been a way to deal with anxiety. I tend to overthink things, especially when I'm stressed out. Practicing mindfulness helps me calm down and focus on what's in front of me instead of letting my mind run wild. It's not always easy, but even just taking a few moments to breathe can make a huge difference. It's like creating space between myself and my thoughts, and that space helps me regain control when things feel overwhelming. I've had nights where my mind just wouldn't stop racing, going over everything I need to do. And mindfulness has been a tool to ground myself and bring my attention back to the present. It's also something I can do anywhere, whether I'm in the middle of the crowded classroom or just sitting alone in my room. Taking a mindful breath can reset everything. I've learned to use mindfulness before stressful situations like right before a big exam, and it really makes a difference in how calm and I focused I feel.
Gurpreet, how about you? How does mindfulness play a role in your life?
Honestly, I think I used to think mindful was just another trend. Something people talk about but never really practice. But after trying it out, I realized it's super helpful. I've got a busy schedule with classes, part time work, and social stuff. So sometimes it feels like I am constantly running. Mindfulness gives me a chance to slow down and stay present, even when things are chaotic. I started with small steps, just taking a minute or two to focus on my breathing, and over time, I noticed it helped me stay more focused and less stressed through the day. It became a part of my daily routine, even it just for a few minutes. Now I use mindful when I am commuting with the study breaks or even I feel overwhelmed by too many things at once. It a particular tool that helps me stay grounded, and it made me more aware of how I am feeling at a given moment. Mindful also helped me to let go the stress faster, like I don't carry it with me as much anymore.
Alright, so we have talked about what mindfulness means to us personally, but let's dive a bit deeper. There's some solid science behind why mindfulness works, especially for students like us who deal with stress every day. Shivam, since you have been researching this, can you tell us a bit about the science behind it?
Yeah, definitely, Ansh. So, mindfulness is shown to reduce stress by calming the part of the brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for fight or fight responses. When we are stressed, the part of the brain is overactive, making us feel like we are constantly in survival mode. Mindfulness practice like meditation help quiet the amygdala and activate the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of a brain responsible for decision making and emotional regulation. Over the time with regular mindfulness practice, you can rewire your brain to handle stress better. What's fascinating is that studies shows even short-term mindfulness practice can make a measurable difference in how the brain responds to stress. It's like giving your brain a workout. Over time, it becomes more efficient at managing difficult emotions and staying calm in stressful situations. I've read that regular practice can even improve things like memory and focus, which is especially useful when you are juggling so many different things as a student.
That's fantastic. Daksh, you are into sports. Does you see a connection between mindfulness and athletics performance?
Yeah, for sure. When you're playing a sport, you must stay in the moment, and mindfulness helps with that. There's research showing that athletes who practice mindfulness can improve their focus and reaction time. It's all about staying in the zone and not letting distractions mess with your performance. I've tried applying it to basketball and it's helped me stay cool under pressure, especially in close games. For example, when you're about to take a free throw, there's so much going on, crowd noise, the pressure of the game. But mindfulness helps me block all of that out and just focus on my breath and the ball. It's not just about physical skill, but mental sharpness. And mindfulness gives you that extra edge. I've noticed that my reaction times have improved and I make fewer mistakes when I'm fully present, both in sports and in other areas of my life.
Akash, you have mentioned using mindfulness to manage anxiety. What does the research says about that?
There's a lot of evidence that mindfulness helps with anxiety and even depression. It's not a cure all, but it can reduce symptoms of helping people becoming more aware of their thoughts and feelings without getting overwhelmed by them. I think of it like this: instead of getting sucked into anxious thoughts, mindfulness helps you notice them, accept them, and move on. It's helped me personally when I'm feeling overwhelmed by schoolwork. There's a thing called decentering where you learn to see your thoughts as just thoughts, not as facts, and that's been useful for me. Instead of getting lost in a spiral of anxiety, I can step back and take a breath, which gives me the space to respond calmly rather than react impulsively.
I'll add that mindfulness isn't just about the mental health. It can improve the focus and the concentration, which is huge for student. If you can train your mind to stay present while you are studying or listening to a lecture, you will more likely to retain information and perform a better academically. I'll found that when I am mindful while studying, I'll get more done in less time because I am not constantly distracted by my phone or the random thoughts. It's almost like I am training my brain to work more efficiently.
Now that we have covered the science, let's talk about how we can practice mindfulness in our daily lives. We all are busy with classes, assignments, and extracurricular activities. So, how do you guys fit mindfulness in your schedule? Akash, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the key is finding small moments to practice mindfulness. For me, it's about taking 5 minutes in the morning to sit quietly and focus on my breathing before starting the day. Sometimes I do it before bed. I've had a rough day. It's not about doing long meditation sessions, it's about consistency. I've realized that even those short moments make a difference. Mornings are especially important for me because that's when my mind tends to start racing about all the things I must do during the day. So, just taking a few minutes to ground myself makes me feel more in control and helps me approach the daily the day calmly. If I don't make time for it in the morning, I notice I'm more anxious and distracted throughout the day. It's really a way to set the tone for how I want to feel.
That's a good point. Gurpreet, what about you?
I try to practice mindfulness during transitions. So when I am walking from one class to another, instead of being on my phone or taking about what's the next, I focus on my surroundings, how the air feels, what sound I hear, the color around me. It's small way to stay present without having to crave out extra time for it. I used to think I don't have time for mindfulness, but when I started incorporating it into things I already do, it became much easier. Even waiting in the line at a coffee shop, I can be a chance to take mindful breath instead of scrolling through the social media. It's like giving myself a little mental break throughout the day. Uh, this participation, uh, this participate has also made me appreciate my environment more. Like notice small things I would have paid attention to before, which has a calming effect.
That's interesting. Using transitions as mentioned to practice mindfulness. Daksh, how about you?
Well, for me, it's about being mindful during workouts. I used to just go through the motions at the gym, but now I focus on my breathing, how my muscles feel, and staying present. It's made my workouts more effective, and I leave feeling mentally refreshed too. There's something about being fully present while exercising that helps me release stress faster. It's not just a physical thing, it's a mental workout too. When I'm lifting weights, for example, instead of zoning out, I pay attention on how my body is moving and how each muscle feels. It keeps me grounded in the moment and helps me push through when things get tough. I also find that I enjoy my workouts more because I'm not distracted or thinking about what's next. I'm just focused on the task at hand.
Shivam, do you have a routine that helps you stay mindful?
Yeah, Ansh, I do something similar when I'm studying. I use a technique called mindful studying where I set timer for 25 minutes, focus fully on one task and then take a 5-minute mindful break. During the break, I'll do some deep breathing or stretch. It keeps me from getting overwhelmed by long study sessions. I used to feel drained after studying for hours, but now with these mindful breaks, I feel more refreshed and can retain more information. It's a small habit that's made a big difference in how I approach my studies. Plus, the short breaks allows me to mentally reset before diving back into the next task. It's like giving my brain a little breather so I don't burn out.
Mindfulness sounds great, but let's be real. Staying mindful in college isn't always easy. We have all got packed schedules and constant distractions. What challenges have you guys faced, and when it comes to sticking with mindfulness? Daksh, you want to start?
Yeah, for sure, Ansh. I think the hardest part is staying consistent. It's easy to skip mindfulness when things get busy. During finals, for example, I find myself too focused on studying and I'll neglect taking time to breathe or just be present. But I've realized that's when I need mindfulness the most. I think it's about making mindfulness a habit. Just like brushing your teeth, it must become something you do automatically, even when you don't feel like it. There have been times when I was overwhelmed and thought I didn't have time to be mindful, but that's usually when I feel the most scattered and stressed. When I look back, I realize that if I had just taken those few minutes to be mindful, I probably would have been more productive and less stressed. So, the challenge is reminding myself that mindfulness isn't an extra task, it's a way to make everything else feel more manageable.
I can relate to that. Akash, what challenges do you face?
I totally agree. It's easy to forget about mindfulness when you are stressed. Sometimes it feels like I don't have time to pause because I've got so much to do. But I've noticed that when I do take even a short break to practice mindfulness, I'm productive afterwards. It's about reminding myself that mindfulness isn't luxury, it's necessity. Especially during high stress times, the hardest part for me is when I'm in the middle of the stressful situation, like when I'm cramming for an exam or dealing with a deadline. My instinct is to just push through the stress, but I've learned that stopping for even 2 minutes to breathe can help clear my mind and give me the energy to keep going. It's counterintuitive, but taking a break can help you get more done.
That's really important point. Gurpreet, do you face similar challenges?
For me, the challenge is staying focused during mindfulness practice. Sometimes my mind just wanders, especially when I am really stressed. I have to learn that it's okay for that to happen. The whole point of mindfulness is notice when your mind wanders and gently bringing it back to the present. It's not about being perfect, it's about being aware. When I first started practicing mindfulness, I used to get frustrated when I couldn't focus or when I'd get distracted. But now I see it's differently. It's not about keeping our mind wandering. It's about noticing when it does and gently string it back. The part of the practice, and honestly, the more I accept that my mind will wander sometimes, the easier it get to bring myself back to the present. Yeah, and I think it's also about not being too hard on yourself. Mindfulness isn't about being perfect. If you miss a day or find it hard to focus, that's okay. Just start again the next day. I've learned that it's a long term practice, it's not about getting a right every single time. There have been plenty of days when I planned to meditate or do something mindful and it just didn't happen. But that doesn't mean I've failed. It's more about building resilience and getting back on the track when things go off course. Over time, I've found that even when I don't actively practice mindfulness every day, the mindset sticks with me and I'm quicker to recognize when I need to slow down and be present.
have talked a lot about mindfulness, but what about some simple, practical exercises that student can use? Let's share a few techniques that anyone can do during a busy day. Akash, what's an easy exercise you do be recommending?
One of the simplest is mindful breathing. You don't need to meditate for a long period. Just pausing for a few minutes and focusing on your breath can have a huge impact. Here's what I do. I close my eyes, take a deep breath in a, for a count of 4, hold it for 4 seconds and exhale for 4. It's called the 4-4-4 technique. This helps me calm down instantly, especially before exams or presentations.
That sounds great. Gurpreet, what's another easy technique?
Another one I use is body scanning. It's great for relaxing at the end of the day or even during the study breaks. I start from the top of my head and work my way down, paying attention to how each part of my body feels. It helps me notice tension and I can let it go as I move through each part. It really helpful when I have been sitting for hours and it makes me feel more connected to my body.
That's a good one. Especially since we all are sitting in front of our laptops a lot. Shivam, do you have a different method to suggest?
Yeah, Ansh, I'd recommend something called mindful walking. It's super simple. Instead of walking on autopilot to class, I focus on my steps, the feeling of my feet touching the ground, the sounds around me, and the air. It turns an ordinary walks into a mindful practice, and it helps me to feel more present and energized for whatever's next.
Awesome tips, guys. These sounds like quick, easy ways for anyone to bring mindfulness into their daily routines without needing extra time. We have mostly talked about how mindfulness helps with stress and focus. But what about mindfulness in our relationships? How does it impact the way we interact with friends, classmates, or even in romantic relationships? Daksh, what's your take?
I think mindfulness in relationships is about being fully present when you're with someone, whether it's a friend or a partner. When we're not mindful, it's easy to get distracted by our phones or by what we have going on. But when I practice mindfulness, I'm more attentive and engaged, which improves communication. People notice when you're really listening and present with them.
That's true, especially now when distractions are everywhere. Akash, have you noticed a difference in your interactions with others when you practice mindfulness?
Definitely, it helped me become more patient and less reactive. When I'm mindful, I don't jump to conclusions or respond impulsively during disagreements. I take a moment to pause, breathe, and then respond thoughtfully. It's made a big difference in how I handle conflict and tough conversation, especially with my friends.
Gurpreet, how has mindfulness helped you in your relationships?
For me, it helped with empathy. Being mindful allows me to be more aware of each people emotion. I am not just focused on what I want to say next. I am actually paying attention to how that other person is feeling. It helped me build stronger connection because people appreciate when they feel truly heard and understood.
That's powerful. I think mindfulness really does improve our relationships by helping us stay grounded and connected with others. Whether it's listening more deeply or managing conflicts, mindfulness can transform the way we relate to the people in our lives. To wrap things up, let's touch on how mindfulness can boost our academic performance. We have all faced the pressure of exams and deadlines. How do you guys think mindfulness ties into your academic success? Shivam, what's your perspective?
Ansh, I'd say it's crucial for focus and retention. When I'm mindful during studies and I'm not just cramming, I'm actually absorbing the material because I'm present and not thinking about distractions. It makes study time more efficient.
That makes sense. Daksh, any thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's all about stress management. When I'm mindful, I don't let the pressure get to me as much. I can approach exams more calmly, which helps me perform better because I'm not overwhelmed by anxiety. Because I'm not overwhelmed by anxiety.
Great points. So, mindfulness isn't just for stress relief, it can actually help us achieve better academic results by keeping us focused and calm under pressure. Definitely something to keep in mind. For this next part, I want to take a broader look at mindfulness, especially how it practiced around the world. Mindfulness is often associated with meditation in the modern sense, but many cultures have their own unique practices. Shivam, I know you have been doing some researches into this. what are some mindfulness traditions from other cultures?
Yeah, Ansh, I would like to share my thoughts on this. Mindfulness has deep roots in various traditions. One of the oldest forms is from Buddhism, where mindfulness is called sati, which is about full awareness and focus in every action in Buddhism. Mindfulness isn't just a tool for stress relief, but a core part of spiritual practice aims that understanding the nature of reality. But it's not limited to Buddhism. There are also forms of mindfulness in Hinduism through practices like yoga and meditation.
That's really interesting. Gurpreet, do you know of any other culture approaches to mindfulness?
Definitely, in Japan, there's something called Zen mindfulness, which focus on sitting meditation or Zen. And mindfulness is everyday task. It's about simplicity and being fully impressed in whatever you are doing. Even something as a routine as drinking tea or can become mindful practice. And its Native American culture, mindfulness is often linked to deep respect for nature and ceremonies that encourage people to be present with the earth.
That's a great perspective. Trying mindfulness to nature and everyday life. Daksh, how do you think these different cultural approaches influence the way we practice mindfulness today?
I think modern mindfulness has taken a lot from these traditions, but we have adapted it to fit our fast paced lives. In today's world, you can be mindful whether you are meditating or just focusing on your breathing while commuting. I think it's important to remember the roots, though, because they show that mindfulness isn't just a trendy thing, it's something that has been helping people for thousands of years.
Another area where mindfulness can be really helpful is sleep. A lot of students, myself included, struggle with falling asleep because our minds are racing. Akash, how has mindfulness helped you with sleep?
Mindfulness has been a game changer for me. I use a simple technique called mindful breathing before bed to calm my mind. Focusing on my breath helps me let go of anxious thoughts and relax, which makes it easier to fall asleep. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I do the same thing to drift back off.
That's great. Shivam, do you have any other top tips for using mindfulness to improve sleep?
Yeah, Ansh, I also recommend body scanning before bed. By slowing focusing on each part of your body, from your head to your toes, you release tension and it really helps you to relax. It's also a good way to clear your mind and any lingering stress from the day.
One last area where mindfulness can really help is with time management. We all know how easy it is to feel overwhelmed by our to do list and deadlines. Gurpreet, how has mindfulness helped you manage your time better?
Mindfulness helped me stay focused on one task at a time. Instead of multitasking, I used to juggle three or four things at once. Things I was being productive, but it just made me stressed or scattered. Now I use mindful schedule where I break my task into smaller parts and give each other one my full attention. This way I actually get more done in less time because I'm not jumping between tasks and constantly getting distracted.
That's smart. A lot of us falling into the trap of multitasking because we think we are saving time. How do you prioritize tasks mindfully? Do you plan your day differently now?
Yeah, I definitely do. I prioritize tasks based on what most important or what required the most focus. I start with the hardest or most mental draining tasks when my mind is fresh. Later in the day, I tackle smaller or less intense tasks, and it's between I take short mindful breaks to reset and stay focused.
Daksh, how do you incorporate mindfulness into managing your busy schedule?
I take short mindful breaks throughout the day. Instead of powering through non-stop, I take 5 minutes to clear my head, which helps me stay more focused and productive. These breaks helps me reset so I don't burn out by the end of the day. Even just a few minutes of mindful breathing or stepping away from my desk helps me come back to my work with a clearer mind.
That's great strategy. It sounds like those breaks actually make you more efficient rather than wasting time.
Exactly, and during those breaks, I avoid distractions like checking my phone or social media. It's all about giving my brain a rest. That way, when I get back to my tasks, I'm more refreshed and ready to focus.
I think that's a key point. Using breaks mindfully rather than letting them turn into distractions. This is really helpful for students who might feel overwhelmed with the workload. It shows how mindfulness can help us and not just manage stress but also work smarter, not harder. Another huge area where mindfulness can make a difference is academic stress. We have all been there, those times when exam assignments and expectation piles up and it feels overwhelming. Shivam, how do you use mindfulness to deal with academic stress?
Ansh, mindfulness has been a lifesaver for me during stressful times, especially around exam season. I used to get so anxious that I couldn't focus, but now I use mindfulness to ground myself. Before I start studying, I take a few moments to center myself with deep breathing. It helps me clear the noise in my ear, in my head, and just focus on what's in front of me.
So, by starting with mindfulness, you are setting the tone for your study sessions.
Exactly. It's like passing a reset button. If I feel overwhelmed while studying, I'll pause and take a mindful break. Just like Dax mentioned earlier, even stepping away for 5 minutes can help me return with a fresh perspective. It reminds me that the stress isn't permanent. It's just a moment.
That's such a good point, Shivam. A lot of times we let stress take over because we think it's going to help last forever. But mindfulness helps us release that it's temporary. Gurpreet, how do you apply mindfulness when you are feeling stressed out by academics?
I use a technique called mindful journaling, especially when I am feeling overwhelmed. I take a few minutes to write down what stressed me out without judgment. It's almost like releasing the pressure after journalizing. I find that the things that seemed huge in the mind feel so intimidating anymore. It feels me put everything into the perspective and approach my work more calmly.
That's a really practical idea. Writing things down helps you see them more clearly and puts you in control. I think a lot of students can relate to that feeling of being overwhelmed, and using mindfulness to like journaling or mindful breathing could help take the edge off. Another interesting way mindfulness can help us is by boosting our creativity. Whether it's for a school project, a hobby, or even solving a tricky problem. Being creative is something we all need. Akash, have you noticed any link between mindfulness and your creative process?
Definitely, creativity used to be a bit of struggle for me, especially when I was overthinking everything or trying to come up with the perfect idea right way. Mindfulness helped me change that by teaching me to let go of to the constant need of perfection. When I do a short meditation or some mindful breathing before I start a creative task, it helps clear my mind of distraction and doubts. I can get it into a flow state more easily and ideas just seem to come naturally.
That's so relatable. Overthinking can really block your creativity, especially when you feel pressured to deliver something great. So, mindfulness helps you quiet those thoughts and just let the idea flow.
Exactly. Before practicing mindfulness, I'd sit down to write or brainstorm and get stuck on what I thought were bad ideas. Now I approach it differently. Instead of immediately criticizing my ideas, I let them develop without judgment. Mindfulness helps me stay present, which means I don't get caught up in seconds guessing myself. At least not until later. When it's time to refine things, it creates more mental space for creativity to flourish.
That's so important. Being present lets you tap into the creative part of your mind without constantly worrying about whether it's good enough. Have you noticed that this also helps you break out of creativity blocks?
Absolutely. Creative blocks used to frustrate me so much. Now, when I hit one, instead of pushing through and stressing out, I step away for a while. I'll do something mindful, whether it's a short meditation, mindful breathing, or even just going outside for a walk, where I focus on my surroundings. It gives my brain some space to breathe. When I come back, I often find I'm more refreshed and have new ideas. It's like hitting the reset button.
That's such a practical tip. Sometime taking a mindful pause is all we need to see things differently. Gurpreet, have you experienced anything similar with mindfulness and creativity?
Yeah, mindfulness has definitely helped me approach creativity with a more open mind. I think the biggest shift for me has been learning not to judge my ideas right away. I used to shut down my ideas almost immediately, thinking that's not good enough or that won't work. Now I use mindfulness to stay open to my ideas without that intense judgment. It helps me to be more curious and allow me to explore ideas more freely. Sometimes the best creative solution come from the idea I would dismiss too quickly before.
That's a great takeaway. It's all about being present and engaged with creative process instead of getting bogged down by fear or expectations. I think a lot of us could benefit from that approach, especially when it feels like pressure to perform is getting in the way of your creativity. Wow, we have covered so much today. From understanding what mindfulness is to practical tips, challenges, scientific insights, and even how mindfulness can be applied in different areas of life. I hope our listeners have found some valuable insights to take away. Before we wrap up, I do like to hear a final takeaway from each of you. Shivam, what's your final thought on mindfulness?
I'll just remember that mindfulness is a practice, not a perfect state. It's okay to have good days and bad days. What matters is that you keep coming back to the present.
Great point, Daksh.
I'd encourage people to explore mindfulness from a scientific perspective too. Understanding how it impacts the brain can really motivate you to stick with it.
How about you, Akash?
My final thought would be not to overthink it. Mindfulness can be as simple as taking a breath and being aware of what's around you.
And Gurpreet?
I just say that mindfulness is a journey. It's about progress, not perfection. And it's okay to take it one step at a time.
Thank you all for your amazing insights. That a wrap for our conversation on mindfulness. I hope our listeners found it helpful and are inspired to bring more mindfulness into their lives. Thank you again, Shivam, Daksh, Akash, and Gurpreet for joining us today.